Remember, you are stronger than you think. Don't believe me? We're about to prove it. Welcome back. This is Jen Lee, creator and host of I Need Blue podcast, True Crime to True Life. As a survivor of armed robbery and abduction, I understand the trauma and triggers survivors experience. Knowing this, and through my powerful podcast, I offer survivors a safe place to share their lived experiences. Survivors need blue to feel they belong, they are loved, understood, and my favorite, empowered. I Need Blue episodes can be found on Apple Podcast, Spotify, and many other listening platforms, including my website, www.ineedblue.net. Please note, I Need Blue does contain sensitive topics which could be triggering. Please seek help if needed, and remember, you always come first. Today's guest is Dr. Marianne Thomas. She is here to share her story of surviving human trafficking and childhood abuse, including sexual, physical, emotional, financial, and spiritual abuse. Dr. Thomas used her lived experience and education to provide counseling and mentorship for abused and trafficked youth and women for over 15 years. She has a PhD in behavioral psychology and an MA in mental health counseling. Marianne is the founder and president of My Name, My Voice, a collective of lived experience experts who provide education and ongoing consultation for organizations who want to build a new or grow their existing anti-trafficking program. She is also a public speaker who helps people overcome self-sabotage by talking about forgiveness. Marianne, thank you for being my guest today, and welcome to the I Need Blue podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here today. I appreciate this opportunity.
Absolutely. I wanted to share something with you that happened on February 16th of this year, so a couple of months ago. I was listening to the news. There was an undercover human trafficking bust in Florida that led to over 200 arrests, and it was a rescue mission of 24 suspected victims. There were 89 suspects arrested for soliciting prostitution and 111 prostitutes arrested. So when you see stories like that, what goes through your head?
I think I know the story you're speaking of. I frequently work with law enforcement while they conduct these undercover operations. And so I'm right there as they arrest the girls or boys who are arrested for prostitution. So right away, we can identify if they are a victim, which in my mind, they all are victims, but not many of them are ready to identify at that moment. We are able to get services for people right away. We connect them immediately with social services. There are other providers there because I'm a connector, not a provider. We connect them to providers right away. They're able to talk to someone like me who has sat in those chairs, who has felt that feeling, who has, wondered what happens next. And so I'm able to sit with the girls and guys, talk to them in the moment. It's a lot going on in an undercover operation. And so bring some sort of peace to what is happening in that moment and explain what's happening next. And if they are able to identify, if they are able to come forward with anything at all, then usually we're able to get their charges dropped. We're able to have them released. Sometimes they have to go to jail for a little bit. Often it is for their own protection while we go after the real bad guys, right? Florida is leading the nation. Tennessee is right there with us on our work in the anti-trafficking movement. And so I'm very proud to be a part of all that. It's awesome.
That's amazing. I'm so glad that we talked about this because a lot of times we see the news story, you hear about the arrests and you're like, oh, thank goodness they're safe. But in all honesty, we don't know what happens after that.
Right.
So when the majority of the times when you are connected with somebody who has just been rescued, what is that person experiencing?
Well, we don't say rescued because that gives people like a savior complex, right? We also say recovered because the same thing, it makes it sound like someone else did all the work for us. So what we say is exited when we exit the life or when we exit human trafficking. So that way we get to own the power of that move. When I encounter someone who is exiting, it's scary. What you're doing is you are asking a person to change everything they have probably ever known. Because what I do know about human trafficking is it begins in childhood. It does not often begin in adulthood. It does, but not often. It's usually something that carries over from childhood abuses. So even if you weren't trafficked until you were an adult, chances are you had all of those childhood abuses that led you very vulnerable for trafficking. When we look at all that, a person has experienced abuse, someone like me, our entire lives. And so when you first come to us and tell us you don't have to live this way, we do not believe you, right? Because that is all we know. People who want to help us are often met with resentment or outright anger or irritation, or just we dismiss them because we don't think we need help. We think this is what my life is, right? And we don't really recognize that there's a different life that we can have.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for saying exited. I think that that's an appropriate word for what is about to transpire for that individual. You just talked about how a lot of this occurs in childhood, and we are here to talk about your lived experience that also began in your childhood. And if you're okay with it, can we talk about your experience?
Yes, we can. My first documented abuse was at 2 months old. So when we talk about children never really having a chance in a different life, that's what we're talking about is our abuses start so very early that it really is all we know. My family looked normal on the outside. If you would have seen us anywhere, we looked normal. I had a mom and a dad and a bunch of brothers and sisters. And we went to church and I went to a private school. And I'm sure we looked like the perfect little family everywhere we went. But inside the house was much different. My dad was very good at portraying one image to the world as a business owner, as a leader in a church, as a lot of things that people looked up to. But in the home, he was very violent and very cruel in the way that he treated all of his children. That abuse was a physical abuse when I was 2 months old, and it started there. I don't have a lot of memory. I think that's a blessing that I don't have a lot of memory of some of those earlier things. I have very vivid memories of some other things that I would gladly give away if I could. But he started abusing me sexually before kindergarten. I can't tell you how old I was, but I know it was before school. That was part of it. And I was his favorite during that time. So while he was sexually abusing me, he was also calling me pet names and giving me special favors and giving me, things my brothers couldn't do. I was the golden child, right? All of that was happening at the same time, which was very confusing for my poor little brain and understanding what love is, what a father should be, right? And then a day came where my mother put a stop to it. It wasn't until I was 7 years old that she put a stop to the sexual abuse. That is when the physical abuse really took off. And so again, in my developing brain, what I was learning is if you give sex to somebody, they won't hurt you. And if you don't give sex to somebody, they're going to hurt you really bad. And so that is the message I was taking in throughout childhood from my father, the person who should have loved me and protected me and done all of those things. When I met my first trafficker, I was easy pickings, right? We say that they go after the vulnerable. They don't want to snatch somebody who's going to scream and yell and throw a fit, right? What they want to do is they want to slowly push boundaries and pull somebody away from anybody safe. Well, I didn't have anybody safe. The only safe people I had were people at my church or people at my school. And so when I met this boy, I was walking home from school one day. I went to a private school. He went to the public school. I was walking home from school. I knew who he was because I had been at the public school, gone back to the private school. I knew he was popular. I knew he played sports. I knew who he was. And as I was walking home from the bus stop, it was quite a long walk. And he said, he had pulled up in his car and he said, "Hey, do you want to ride?" And I said, "Sure." And he had 3 friends with him. And I didn't think anything about it. Jumped in the car, right? They're just teenage boys. I was 15 years old when this happened. They gave me a ride home. When they got to my house, they said, "Hey, we're just going to go over to this guy's house. Do you want to go with us?" And I said, "Sure, I do." And I think I'm being invited to like the cool kid's house. This is going to be, something special. I thought this is awesome because they go to public school. So, it's a little dangerous too, right? So I had all of that in my head, but I was excited to go. I really thought they wanted to hang out and be friends. And that very day was the very first time that I was trafficked. That day I had to have sex with 2 of those boys. And that boy who picked me up became my first trafficker. And he continued to bring his friends to me, coerce me to have sex with his friends, saying things like, "I'm your boyfriend, and if you loved me, you would do this. And because this boy gave me a ride to your house, we owe him. So we have to pay him. And so you have to do XYZ." And that's how it started for me. And I think a lot of people don't recognize that trafficking doesn't have to involve cash, right? A lot of people want it to involve cash, but it's the exchange of anything of value. So safety, security, love, shelter, food, right? Those are all things of value that can be exchanged for a human being. So that's what he was doing to me. During this time, my poor brain started to explode, right? Because I couldn't wrap my head around everything that was happening. I didn't want it to happen. I also didn't know how to make it stop happening. I was very afraid of my dad finding out because my dad was so violent. And so I had all of this going on. I started skipping school. I started skipping everything, not going to church, not going to school. And I was very involved in my church at the time. But I started pulling out of society completely. I would physically fight my mom when she tried to make me go to school. I got kicked out of the Christian school during this time, and I had to go back to the public school. When I walked into the public school for the first time, and I had been there before, I had gone back and forth, but I hadn't been there in a while. And when I walked in, I found out that everybody knew. The public school, everybody was talking about what I was doing and what a dirty person I was and calling me all of the names associated with that. So from that first day on, I was also being attacked at school from girls who would physically come up and attack me, saying that I did this or that. Boys who would come up and want to join in on what they had heard about. And it was awful. And so I just stopped. I stopped going and I refused. But I love school. And so around this time, my dad decided that I was a problem child. And I can understand that. I was refusing school. I was fighting my mom. I was screaming, yelling, doing all those things. But I was doing all of those things as a natural response to someone being raped, right? That's a natural response. My father kicked me out of the house and eventually had me emancipated. I was 15 years old. And so I had to then figure out where to live, how to live, what to do. And so that was my first real jump into what the street life is like, because up till that point, I'd been very sheltered in a lot of ways, not in the home, but outside the home. And so that was my first time being homeless, experiencing survival sex, where you have to trade your body in order to have a place to sleep or food to eat, something to take care of your person or for safety. And so that was a big part of my life for about a year. I got away from my original trafficker because I was homeless. He just couldn't find me anymore. This was before cell phones, right? And so I was just gone. And so that part was kind of a blessing. I went across the country and back. I made it back to Florida again. I was very resourceful out in the streets. And then at the age of 17, I was back in Florida. I was working 3 jobs. I had a full-time job, I had a part-time job, and then I was babysitting on weekends and evenings. I was doing my best to pull it together as much as a 17-year-old can. I was babysitting one evening and I met a boy at the bowling alley where I had taken the kids while I was babysitting. I thought it would be more fun than sitting at the house. And so we were at the bowling alley and there was a boy next to me who was kind of flirting with me, commenting on my bowling. And he was about my age. I didn't think anything about it. And then the phone rang, again, before cell phones, the phone rang at the bowling alley and they made the announcement, will this person come and accept this phone call, please? Well, the name they said was the name of my first trafficker. And so that stopped me cold. And I was like, oh, no. And so I kind of looked around and I didn't see him. But the guy who was next to me went and answered the phone. And I thought, okay, that's weird. And so when he came back, I just asked him, I said, hey, I know that person. I said, you're not that person. Why did you just go answer that phone? And he told me, he said, he goes, that's a friend of mine, but he's really a dirtbag. He's cheating on his girlfriend right now. And I don't like that he does that, but that's why I answered the phone. It was his girlfriend looking for him. And he tells me this whole story about how it's his friend, but he's really a dirtbag and he doesn't really like him. And so I thought, oh, okay, well, you know that he's not a decent person. So this seemed okay. That night he had asked me for my phone number, but I didn't have one because I was homeless. And so instead we had agreed to meet at the beach the next day. We lived in a beach town. So we met at the beach the next day and agreed to meet again the next day. And that third day I moved in with him. At first it was a normal relationship, if that can be normal at 17, moving in with somebody in 3 days, but it seemed like a regular boyfriend and girlfriend. But again, that then changed. And then it was, well, this friend did this for us, or we need to pay rent, or we need this. And so the whole cycle started again. I wish I could say it stopped with him, but it didn't. I followed that pattern for quite some time. I was with him for several years. Then when I left him, I would have some space sometimes where it felt like I was getting my life together. And then I would meet another guy and be back in the same pattern again. And then I would find some space and then maybe I'd meet a nice guy. And that would feel even weirder because I really didn't know how to handle that. My second trafficker, I had dabbled in drugs before him, but he helped me solidify that. And so I became addicted to cocaine, which lasted about a decade. Even when I was trying to be what I thought normal was, and date normal guys, whatever that meant to me back then, I also still had this drug habit. So I also had all these other things going on. I started having children at the age of 19. And so I was dragging kids along through all of this, through my addiction, through unhealthy men, whether they were traffickers or just abusers. My kids had to live through all of that. And then finally, I thought I had it licked. I thought I got it this time, right? I had dated a nice guy for well over a year. I had gotten off cocaine and drugs, all the other drugs that go along with that sometimes. I thought I had it. I thought, we've got this. I had a couple of kids at the time, and he was a good father figure role model to them. And so I really thought I had it. I thought, okay, I thought I was living a fake life because I felt like I had to pretend and to act to fit in his world. And it felt strange to me, but I thought if I can just do all the things that I see like his sisters do or his mother do, then that means I'll be a normal person and this will all be fine and we can live happily ever after. And that was my plan. However, I still had all this brain stuff that was not going well. And so I pushed him pretty far away, pretty good. And so I did some horrible things, and he's still a kind person to me. At that point, when I had pushed him away and he was trying to decide, whether or not that was something he wanted to try again with me, I met another guy. And This guy wasn't talking to me. He had gone and taken some real space. He'd gone all the way to Alaska. So he took space. And my dad was back in the picture at this time. At times in my life, I would reach out to my parents and try to have a relationship, and it always went badly. But at this time, I had been in a pretty bad car wreck, and I had these 2 little kids. And so my parents had allowed me to move in with them, with my kids, for the summer. My dad had asked me if I wanted to go country dancing. We both like country music, and we were getting along. It was some weird space in our relationship where it seemed like we were friendly without any sort of abuse or manipulation, I thought. We started going dancing on Friday nights together, my dad and I, at this country bar, and we didn't stay late. Neither one of us could stay up that late, but we would go and have a good time. During that time, I met a guy at the bar. He seemed like a nice guy. He met me with my dad. That seems wholesome on the outside, right? He had a mom and a dad. He had a normal family. He had a child of his own. He seemed pretty normal. And so the relationship with the other guy was fizzled and not working. And this guy and I became friends, and we started as friends. And I got to know him, and we would hang out with our kids. And he knew there was this other guy somewhere in the background, and he dated whoever he dated. We were friends, right? We hung out. It was fun, and we talked on the phone, and we got to know each other. And then sometime after the other boy and I had decided this was not going to be, the new guy from the bar and I were talking, and he and I decided, let's try this. We get along so good. Let's do this, right? We got together and we had children and we got married and everything looked good. And then there wasn't any money. He had been working. He had been doing his best. He had a child from a previous relationship. That was a strain. He had to pay a lot of money for that. There was a lot going on. And he had been doing, I think, his absolute best in that first year or so, 2 years. And then after my final child was born, we had been living on money I had gotten from my car wreck, and he had been working during that time too. And then when the money from my car wreck ran out, he decided he did not want to go back to work. He decided he wanted to just go to the gym. We decided that I would go to the strip club and dance for 2 weeks to pay the rent. That was the plan, is that I was going to go to the strip club. He had known I'd been a dancer before. That had been part of my trafficking story. And so it felt like no big deal. Nobody will know. I'll just sneak into the club for 2 weeks, make enough money for rent and for what we need. And then he'll go find another job and we'll go back to normal. I went to that club, and 5 years later, I was begging him to let me leave. I was begging him to let me leave. I was begging him to please go get a job so I could quit. I was telling him that I literally said to him, this takes a piece of my soul every time I have to walk in there. It was also my first time doing it sober-ish. I mean, I drank, but I was off all drugs. You feel it a lot differently when you can't numb it out. A lot of people think, oh, well, you're just a dancer, just a stripper. But no one is just a dancer. That's not how those clubs work. I know what the movies look like. I know how people portray it. I don't care if it's the fanciest club or the dirtiest club. There is sex for sale in every single one of them. And you have to pay to work at them. So when I walk in at night, I already owe about $150 the minute I walk in the door. So I have to at least make $150 to walk back out the door. If there's not customers for dancing, if nobody wants to see you dance, you have to do whatever you have to do to make that money. Plus, at that time, I had 4 children to support and a husband. So I had to make enough money to pay the rent for the 4 children and the husband, to keep food on the table. My kids all played sports. I had to pay for all those registration fees, all the shoes, all the equipment. Somebody had to pay for that. And my husband was not working at all. He might get a job for a month and then he'd quit the job. And he would say things like, well, I have to be at the gym 3 hours a day. So work doesn't really I can't get a job. There's nobody who will hire me for those other hours and things like that. And he would also use manipulation by saying things like, if you were a good mom, your son would have the best cleats. If you were a good mom, your son would be able to do YZ. I only had boys. So if you were a good mom, your son would do this. And he would use that to get me to go make more money. And all I knew is I'd never had a normal family. And so he must be right. He must be telling me the truth. And so all I wanted to do was do the best that I could. And I was doing everything I knew. Luckily, there was somebody who saw that I did not need to be in the life I was in. And it was another guy. He was a strip club at the DJ who never asked anything of me, became my friend without expecting anything in return, right? All of those things. But he became my friend because I had gotten so angry and so violent by this time. All the violence that was thrown at me, I was throwing back at everybody else. I was horrible to my children when they were growing up. I was violent to my children growing up. I was violent to my partners, boyfriends, husbands, whoever they were. I was violent to customers in the club. I was angry and taking it out on everybody. And so at the club, I was known for fighting the customers, not the other girls, but the customers. And so it was nothing for me to pick up something and hit somebody in the head with it. And so the DJ was like, you're going to get arrested and probably get us shut down. So you need to stop. And so he kept having me sit in the DJ booth so I wouldn't fight people. And so I would sit in the DJ booth while he did his thing. And he was in college at the time. So he would be doing his math homework. And I would sit there and say, that's not right. And I would tell him what to do. I had dropped out of school. I think the last time I went for a full year might have been ninth grade, but I think ninth grade was really only part of a year too. So it might have been eighth grade that the last time I was a full year there, but I dabbled in and out of school. My second trafficker made me get a GED because he said I was an embarrassment to his family without it because they were in education. I got my GED because of him, and I have thanked him for that since. I had nothing, right? I had nothing, but I liked numbers. I always liked math, and I just remembered what I had learned. And so I was helping him with his math homework and helping him with his math homework. And he kept saying, I think you should go to college. I was like, no, I don't think so. And he said it over and over for 4 years. He kept telling me, I think you should go to college. Finally, I don't know how he convinced me or why I finally listened, but he had to literally walk me through it. So he had to take me to the school, show me how to register. He had to show me how to take a placement test. He had to show me how to go find books. He had to walk me to my classroom on the first day of school because I literally would have chickened out any time, any step along that way. He did all of those things to help me leave that life. After that first semester of school, I realized I could do something different, and I never, ever went back to that life again. I left my husband. I took all of those kids, and I learned how to be poor, right? I learned how to have absolutely nothing. I learned how to feed kids from buy one, get one free pasta at Publix. I learned how to be homeless with children and try to use the social services that are out there, which are never near enough. But I had to learn a whole new way of living. And that's what people don't understand about us is they think once we walk out of that life, everything should be perfect, right? We left the awful part behind, and that's great. But the new life we're stepping into is so much harder because we knew what that old life looked like. This new life is it's different. We don't know what to do, how to act, how to behave, how to dress, and everybody expects us to know things. I left the life at 32. A 32-year-old woman with 4 children, you would expect to know an awful lot about how the world works, right? I knew nothing. And so people would look at me and expect me to know how to do things. And I would get frustrated inwardly. I would never show that I couldn't do things, right? I would always fake it till I could figure it out. But that shame that you carry because why don't I know how to do this? Every other 32-year-old knows how to do this. Every other mom knows how to do this. What's wrong with me, right? There's a lot of that because we have to learn so many things that we didn't get to learn because our brain was so busy surviving.
Wow. That's an amazing story. The first thing that really surprised me is I think a lot of people think human trafficking is a child and an adult.
Right.
Yours was a teenage boy. So that right away was like this aha moment. It's like, wow, that was eye-opening. Definitely. So thank you for sharing that. And then through your story, I find myself rooting you on. Like, I want you to find somebody to love you. You know what I'm saying? Which was the same thing I'm sure you were looking for. But you had a very distorted view of love from how you had been treated and how you assimilated things. Oh, wow. Gosh, till 32. Tell us where you are today.
Well, I jumped into that whole school thing. I figured this seems like something I know how to do and I can do it well. And so I jumped in. But because I didn't know how to ask for help, my school, if you look at my school record, it looks a little crazy because I kind of took this weird path. I just took classes that sounded interesting to me. I knew that they had to add up to a degree, but I didn't realize that you're supposed to just take those classes, right? And that there should be some efficiency to the process. And so I would just take anything that sounded interesting. I spent about a year and a half just taking math and sciences for a while. So I bounced around. At first, I thought I wanted to be a lawyer. I wanted to change the system. I wanted to change things for people who like me. And then I was like, I took my first psychology class and I was like, wait, this makes sense. This is starting to sound familiar to me and understanding what the brain does. And so I just started taking more and more of those classes, which led me to the degrees that I have. Those classes started adding up to degrees and schools started saying, okay, you've taken all these classes here. Please leave our school, go somewhere else now. And so that's how I ended up going on and getting more degrees, is because I would just soak in as much as I could. And that's why my degrees, sometimes people go, those don't match. I'm like, I know, I get it. Yeah, I get it. It wasn't on purpose, but it makes sense for me. And while I was still in school, because my master's is in mental health counseling, and you have to take internships and stuff like that and learn how to be a counselor. And so with my internships, I started at the Salvation Army. And by me, they had a huge program. So they had the Bureau of Prisons and Department of Corrections and a women and children's shelter and a drug facility. And I was like, these are my people, right? I get this. And so as I'm still studying, I'm also sitting in an environment where I can observe people who are living a life that I had lived. And I'm watching all that they're doing. And I'm going, oh, I did that. And I did that. And I did that. And I did that. And I started putting a lot of the pieces together. But it wasn't until I was working for the Salvation Army and I was sitting in a training on human trafficking, and I was sitting with my good friend. We're sitting there, we're learning what human trafficking is, and they're going down all the list, the commercial exchange, force, fraud, coercion, if you're over the age of 18, and they're talking about what all of human trafficking is. And I'm checking off every single box. And I'm like, oh, uh-oh. Because up until that point, I would have told you that I chose bad men. I would have told you that I chose bad behaviors. I would have told you that I did things for my family. Never in a million years would I have pointed the finger at those men, ever, at all, including my father, right? That was just how life was. And so it was sitting in that training when I was like, oh, okay, this is what this is. And then I started wrapping my brain around that and jumping into counseling to put some more pieces together with some help and have accountability for the changes I was making in my life and on this journey. And then I worked in programs for quite some time. I ran what is called the gold standard of safe homes for minor girls who have been trafficked in the state of Florida. I ran that for close to 5 years and loved doing that. I was one of the first members, ended up overseeing the entire program of what is the largest anti-trafficking mobile program in the state of Florida. And so I've had my hand in direct care for quite some time. It is a lot of work. And so I left my last job last year and started my own company called My Name, My Voice. And what we are is a collective of lived experience experts, a collective of people like me, girls and boys. And we do public speaking where we educate people about what human trafficking is. but we also go to organizations and help them do their anti-trafficking program better. I helped a church begin a drop-in center. They had a strip club outreach program and they wanted a place for those ladies to come to. So I helped them build a drop-in center that they have now, and they're doing well with that. And right now, where you see me right now, I'm at an organization called One Purse. And what they do, it's fascinating. They take high-end purses, right? People donate them, they sell them online, and then all of that money goes to scholarships for people who have survived human trafficking. They are one of the organizations who provided me with a scholarship back in the day. And so they've now hired me to come here for the summer while their CEO is on a sabbatical. And so I get to hang out here for the summer and help this program that already invested in me. And this is absolutely amazing that I can see my whole life come full circle.
Absolutely. And can you send me the information on One Purse?
Yeah.
And thank you for sharing that, because I was going to ask you, what was the moment you realized that you had been trafficked, that you had been abused, that aha moment, right? Now that you're helping all of these other individuals, do you get triggered?
Every day. Yeah. Yes. I have to tell people all the time, it's up to me to control my triggers, right? It's up to me to cope with my triggers. It's up to me to figure all that out. Now, people who care about me should try to not poke that bear, right? But for the average person, you're going to, because you can't, 32 years of abuse, right? Plus the years after that, when I was trying to leave it and I was still in all those messed up situations, trying to figure things out, right? All of that, it's almost impossible for you to be someone who doesn't remind me of something, right? Right. And so that's just a reality. Wherever I go, I can see something that reminds me of a house, a room, a plant, whatever's around me. And it's up to me to know how to deal with that. There are certain things that maybe I avoid because I know it will be triggering. You'll find this to be true with a lot of girls and guys like me. Things like holidays. I go to church. I believe in Jesus, but I sure don't go at Christmas, and I don't go at Easter, and I don't go at Mother's Day and at Father's Day because those family events can be overwhelming. I don't do that. I avoid things that are going to be painful for me. We have anniversaries of certain traumas, right? During that time, the people who know me best know, hey, during this season, this is a tough time for me. This day is a tough time for me. This week is a tough time for me. And so they know, if I'm a little short with you, maybe I'm going through something, maybe that's not, my usual lovely self, right? And so, but I'm to a point where I can have those conversations, and then still something will pop up that triggers you that never triggered you before, and all of a sudden triggers you in a moment and never triggers you again. Like, for example, I was talking with some staff one day and somebody offered me a piece of black licorice. I like licorice. I've never had a problem with licorice. It also used to be my dad's favorite candy. In that moment, the minute they said black licorice, I went cold. I could feel it. I could feel the panic start, and I had to talk myself through it. And I was like, what? That's never happened before. And you can see to this day, I can say it all day long. It doesn't faze me a bit. So it was just that one in the moment. So either maybe something else was in the back of my head already that led me a little bit more susceptible. I'm also a huge proponent of self-care. So if I'm not taking care of my physical body, I know that I'm more susceptible to other triggers too. So I'm very good at, like today, bringing up my story and sharing my story can be potentially triggering. So I did my usual morning. I went to the gym. I did some yoga. And my plan for after this, I'd already told everybody, all the staff, that after this, I'll either go for a walk or treat myself to a coffee because I've been off coffee. And that will be, how I process through the after part of this.
Thank you so much for sharing that.
Absolutely.
Can we talk, because we talked about this in your introduction, the self-sabotage and forgiveness?
Yeah, I love to talk about that. I was mad at my dad, right? Rightfully so. I was mad at my dad. But my anger at my dad was holding me back from relationships, from health for my own self, right? Because anger only hurts me inside me. It doesn't hurt that person. My dad was off living his life. He could care less that I was mad, right? I was only hurting me. And so I had to learn the art of forgiveness. And it was a process, decade process, right? And I had to go through it one at a time. Forgiving my dad, like walking through that with help, with counseling, with mentors. You need all of that in your life if you're trying to change your life, right? And so I had to learn how to forgive people so that I was not stopping myself from, like you said, I want that person one day, right? That is exactly what I was looking for. Is I was looking for that family, not necessarily the man, but the family is what I was trying to recreate always. And I never could. Every time I did, it was going horribly wrong. And because that is the goal, well, the family part might be a stretch because we're not having babies anymore, but because that is the goal, that's what my heart has always desired. I was never going to get that if I held on to the anger to my dad, right? I was never going to be a good partner if I held on to that anger. I was never going to be a good partner if I didn't let go of those men who weren't good husbands, right? I had to be able to forgive them in order to be a wife one day, if that's in my path, but even to be in a relationship. And so I took a long time of my life, years and years of not dating at all, of only working on me. And then I would try to go on a date and I'd be like, oh, no. I'd go back to working on me. And so I would do that. And I kept that pattern for quite some time where I just didn't date people because I was like, I've got to figure this out because I didn't want to find that nice guy like I had before and then spew all that garbage on him too. I had already seen myself do that to somebody and I didn't want to be that person again. I was grateful that that person forgave me. I don't want to do that twice. My goal was to figure it all out before I actually tried to start dating. Then I spent a year where I said, I'm just dating Jesus, right? Because guys started coming to me saying, well, I think you should date me. And I'm like, I don't think so. And I kept feeling unhealthy people were still gravitating towards me, which tells me something about me. Either they think I'm going to fix them or I'm still unhealthy, right? Either they've seen me progress and they think I can help them progress, or I still have stuff to work on. And so I took a year where I said, I'm just going to date Jesus so people would quit asking me. And that gave me that space to really figure it out and outline, what am I looking for? Because I hadn't done that before. You know, what would I want in a partner? What attributes, what characteristics? You know, I like to get up at 5 a.m. I like somebody who wants to get up at 5 a.m. too, right? I like somebody who wants to get up and go to the gym. And I'd never thought about those things before. I'd never thought about what I wanted in a mate. I'd only thought about how I could be a good mate. And so I started thinking about what I wanted in a mate. I'm like, I've worked on me. Now let's figure out what I want. And then after that is when I was like, okay, I think now I'm ready to start dating. I think I'm ready to figure this out now. And I wish I could have made that a reality show because I think it would have been very entertaining, but probably not nice to the people I was dating. So
I love that you say you dated Jesus for a year to really figure out, you know, what it was that you wanted. We're never really alone. Like God is always there with us, but we don't always realize that. Life kind of takes over. And I've recently gotten back to church myself. And so I understand that relationship and I appreciate it. So I'm so glad that Jesus was, you know, part of your journey here as well.
Thank you. I was raised in a church, so I always had that background. I thought God was probably mad at me for quite some time, and we didn't really talk. Right? But in my healing, what I've discovered is that I couldn't have survived that life. I could name several times that I should have been dead, that I almost was dead, and I'm sitting right here, right now. I know I've beat the odds. So many of my survivor sisters are no longer with us, or are still struggling with addiction, or are still struggling with whatever. I was blessed with this brain. Nothing about my past says I should have these degrees right now. So there's a reason that he gave me this brain. He wants me to do something with it. And you can't forgive. I don't know how people forgive without Christ. I just don't. Not that it made it easy, right? But it was what I had to fall back on, because I was able to fall back on, he sure forgave me, because in all that trafficking, in all that abuse, yes, it was horrible what people did to me, but I also did horrible things to other people, right? I took all that was thrown on me and I threw it on everybody around me. And I also want forgiveness and grace for all of that. I had to wrap my head around, I need my kids to forgive me. I need my family members to forgive me for certain things. I need friends to forgive me for things that I did. I need other survivors to forgive me for things that I did. So if I'm looking at who I am now and thinking that I'm worthy, whatever that means, right, of forgiveness from those people, then how can I look at my traffickers, my husbands, those people who hurt me so badly, my dad? How can I look at them and not offer the same forgiveness? It's not right and it's not fair. It's not what Jesus would do. And so I had to figure that out. I had to figure out how I was going to get past that. Now, that doesn't mean I want to hang out with them, right? That doesn't mean that we're going to be best friends. But I can say that with my ex-husbands, at least, we have a friendship where we can be in the same room. We can, talk. We can, if our kids want to get together, we can all be together and it's not weird for anybody, but I'm also not going to go to dinner with them one-on-one. Right.
Right. You have boundaries.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Healthy boundaries. I love that. I'd like to end with some words of comfort that you could share to somebody listening who maybe can relate to your story.
Sure. To anyone who relates to any piece of what I've said, I see you. It doesn't have to be the same story, the same experiences. What I know is that how we think and how we feel and our emotions and our behaviors are very similar, even if our stories look different, even if we look different. And so I want you to know that I see you and that you don't have to do this. You just don't. It's going to be hard and it's going to be ugly and you're going to want to run back a million times and probably will run back a million times. But you keep pushing forward because it is so beautiful on this side.
Oh gosh, I love that. That about brings tears to my eyes when you say, I see you. So many times you feel alone.
Yes, and unseen. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Unseen, unheard. You don't know where to turn. I think that's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Is there anything else you want to add?
I don't think so. This has been a good experience. I don't even think I need the coffee, but I still want it. So
I'm so glad it was positive for you. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your story. And thank you for being my guest today.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. This is Jen Lee with the I Need Blue podcast. Remember, you are stronger than you think. Thank you for listening.